Well, hello everyone. This is Gladys again with David's Journey 2021, and this is my second video. I created an introduction video yesterday, Sunday, and this is my first. Well, it's really my second, and I just want to talk a little bit because I'm going to continue. This is about my son, his journey and how it started. I think I gave some little clips, snippets in my talk yesterday. David was my fourth child, and if you go back to the introduction, you're going to hear that. He was my fourth child. I had two girls and two boys. Now I have one boy and two girls, and I don't want to concentrate too much on that because I really there's a goal in me and there's a desire within me to make these videos for me, definitely, because I'm honoring my son's memory. And then also to help other parents that are going through the process, because it really is a major process of losing a child. And again, I'm in part of a group, and some of the parents have lost two children, which I have no clue about. I can't even imagine the pain they're going through, but I do know there's a lot of pain involved. So going back to David, David was sick in Miami when he was 4 years old. Anyway, moving ahead, I moved to North Carolina, I think in 1987. And I was at a women's retreat. When I came back, the lady that was taking care of him said that he wasn't feeling well. So he was 7 years old. We called the paramedics. He said he was having chest pains, and I couldn't understand how a 7-year-old was having chest pains. When you hindsight and you look back, you realize a lot of things were leading up to June 2nd, 2021, because that's when he passed away. But anyway, they took him to Carolina's Medical Center. We were there, and I I didn't know how difficult it would be or even what he was going to go through. By the time I got to see David in the intensive care unit, it was like 6 hours later. And I couldn't even recognize him. He developed adult respiratory distress syndrome. And it's really called for adults because usually children don't have it. But David developed that, I guess, on the way through from the paramedics, from the ambulance, all the way to the hospital. And then he developed because I couldn't see him for at least 6 or 7 hours. And so by the time I went into the intensive care unit, I couldn't even recognize him. And I said to the nurse, "Where is David?" And she said, "He's right there." And I just kind of stood and I'm thinking, that's not my son. He blew up. He blew up because of the ARDS, adult respiratory distress syndrome, which is a lot of fluid inside the lungs, okay? And usually they call it adult again because a lot of children do not get it, or at least at that time they were not diagnosing children with that. Anyway, he developed that. Then he had a swine catheter into his jugular vein because his heart rate went up. And he never had any of those problems. He was diagnosed with nephrotic syndrome, which is protein in the urine, but never had any heart rate problems or blood pressure problems, never. And so then he developed renal failure. And so this is in 1987. He developed renal failure. He already had lung problems because that's why he looked like he was 300 pounds. He was running a fever. So, they were taking a lot of measures to avoid him passing at that young age, at 7. But anyway, once I got there, while I was there with him, I kind of talked to him. I just kind of say, "David, mom's here, mom's here." But, he he didn't respond. He could hear me because I said to him, "David, if you can hear me, just move your finger a little bit." And he did. So I knew I knew he was hearing me. And so I kept talking to him. And then the doctors came. He was there. He was on life support 8 weeks. And they told me that he was going to die. And I, at that time in 1987, November, well, it was heading up to 1988. The only thing I knew how to do, I didn't have any hope. So, in the only way I could do is just release a lot of that pain. And what I did, I cried, I prayed. Whatever I knew to do, I did that. And we do that for our children, whether they're young or older. They could be teenagers. But that's what I did. But anyway, things started going downhill like really quickly. His lungs were not functioning at all. He ran a fever of 105.7. So they had to get a special bed for him, and they had to put something on his bed to keep his temperature down because so many things could have happened that didn't. There was a lot of things that were happening in this journey that David went on, but I, as a parent, went on with him. And that's why I am creating these videos for parents to realize that they're not alone, even though sometimes isolation comes. All these kind of things we're going to talk about as I continue going on the videos or on the YouTube. But anyway, by that time, he was there 8 weeks on life support. Slowly they took him off. Slowly they started giving him ice cream. We took him home. He was already 7.5. He never had any other problems. 7, 8, 9, 10, 11. He just was a teenager, young teenager. Went to school, went to a private school, did really well. He was not involved in a lot of sports. He was not, he didn't have any desire for sports. And I saw through a mother's eyes, we see things great and well. But I look back now, were they well or were they not? And it's something sometimes we don't know have the answers yet, but we will. And parents, if you're on here or you come on here and you listen to this, whatever answers we need, some of them do come and some of them don't. But anyway, David did good. He came out of the hospital, had his nephrotic syndrome, which is the protein in the urine, seemed to subside. Never had any problem. I would take him to the pediatrician, nothing. Everything was fine. I took him to a nephrologist in Charlotte, North Carolina. He told me, he said, I'm proud of David. I said, do I need to continue bringing him here? He says, no, I'm discharging him. So I said, that's great news. Not realizing, what was going to happen down through the years. And at that time, he grew to be 15, 16 years old, typical teenager. And then probably in his late, maybe 20s. Yeah, because he died when he was 40. So in the late 20s, he started developing hypertension. He went to his primary doctor. We took him there. Of course, they give you a dietitian to watch your sodium intake and different things like that. But what can you tell a teenager? You're not supposed to be eating this, but yet you're consuming it, and it's gonna hurt you later. But a teenager, when they're young like that, they don't even adults don't listen. So he ate potato chips. He just ate what he wanted to eat. At that time, he was still in school. He graduated from high school. I have a beautiful picture of him that I'm gonna put later on when I learn to put pictures about David there. But he was fine. But in his 20s, maybe mid-20s, maybe 23, 24, 25, I don't remember exactly. I would have to go back to my journals. But the blood pressure, hypertension. So they couldn't control it. He couldn't control it. And so they put him on medication. So he was fine. He was doing good. He was working. He had good jobs. Then he, 25, let me see, he died at 40, 35, 40. Yeah, around 25, I think. I think he was 25, about 45, maybe younger. He brought a young lady to the house, and her name was Kim, which became his wife. And David had two children, Elijah and Kaya, and but still dealing with different things regarding hypertension. And if we all know, I am not a doctor, but I am speaking out of experience. A lot of times when an individual, a child, a mid-adult, an older person, when they do not take care of the hypertension, people don't know that, but it does damage the heart. These are the things that I learned later. It does damage the heart. So once I didn't think it was going to damage the heart, but it did. It was beginning to damage the heart. So then it came a time that he was in and out of the hospital. But mind you, I didn't realize that this was going to end up in his passing. I didn't. I still had hope. I was scared. I was frightened. I didn't even know what to feel. I did experience seeing my mother lose two of her sons, which were my brothers that were younger than me. I didn't see too much emotion on my mom, but it was like it took a toll on her. The quietness. She was a very shy person, quiet, but the suffering of losing a child shows up in the countenance of a person. And so I would say, Mom, are you okay? But not realizing, not then, not then. My first brother, I think he died in the 80s. My second brother died in 1993. And not realizing that I would walk this journey. But I didn't walk it alone. David was with me. David, he was such a, and I'll talk more about the big teddy bear, like we used to call him. But anyway, I didn't realize, again, that hypertension, it does affect the heart. If you do not treat hypertension, whether it's alternative or conventional, that's up to the individual's prerogative, but you have to treat it because sooner or later it is affecting. It's the blood flow it's not having that free flow that it should through the heart, out the heart, through the body, for the brain. It wasn't having that. I did not know that. I know that now. And I learned a lot of those things kind of close to his passing, to his death. But they put him on hypertension medicine. But then he ended up in the hospital. And I was so frightened. I ended up there. My daughter Sandy was with me. And we were just so scared. And the doctor told us that they needed to put a pacemaker in him because his heart could stop and they needed to jumpstart it. You know, it's like you have to jumpstart your heart. So he had a pacemaker. And inside of me, I felt, okay, maybe between the hypertension and the pacemaker, it'll be okay. And then it'll be done. But it wasn't like that. It just kept going. He had a pacemaker all the way until he ended up in the intensive care. But he had it on maybe 5 or 6 years. It had to jumpstart him twice that I know of. As he got older, he kept things from me, and I know why he did. But he would tell his sister, my daughter, that they were like best friends. They were brother and sister, but they were like best friends. He confided in her, and she confided in him. So he would say, "Don't say anything to Mom." And she honored his requests. But that means it kept me out of what was going on and still having a hope that it would be just the pacemaker, hypertension, and he would, continue to mature and grow and maybe change his diet. But of course, it never came to that. From the pacemaker, he just kept. His diagnosis was congestive heart failure, and it's not what's the other one? Cardiomyopathy, which his wife is a nurse, Kim, and she says it's just the heart enlarges. It becomes big, and then it's really hard for the blood to pump. So he had those things, but he developed many other things from heart disease. But from there, it was years, and he got married with Kim, his wife. It was a beautiful wedding. They have two children. Oh, they had two children. Of course, Kim is alive. David is not, and it's Elijah, and he's 21. He just got married last year, and this month his wife Madison is due with their first baby. And then they had Kaya, and Kaya is his second. Um, well, he only had a boy and a girl, and she's in UNC Wilmington, studying to be a nurse. The pain that they have expressed, what they went through, what I went through, these are the things that I am going to talk about, because a lot of times parents want to keep hush hush because they're afraid somebody will not understand. But I want to tell you, this channel is for you to know that I do understand. I can relate. I can relate to parents dying because both my parents are deceased. Both my brothers, the three brothers are gone, and three of my sisters are gone. So I can relate into that area, but I also can relate to a parent losing a child, and the toll it takes on that parent or those parents. We have no clue unless we have experience. Why I'm here, it is to share my experience. That is my content. It's not a professional, but I want to reach people because I really want to be a bridge where people can say, I can walk this bridge because she's already walking it. And there's people that right now, they're just early in their child's passing, and some 10, 15, 20, even 30 years. But I still want to be a bridge of my experiences, how I have struggled and still struggling, how I've dealt with a lot of pain. And these are the things, the emotions involved in losing a child. It's like no other emotion. But when David had the pacemaker, let's go back a little bit. He had the pacemaker. He was doing good. He got married. But I could tell that things were changing. I could see it in his countenance. He was driving. He held down a job. He was fine. But he ended up a lot in the not in the intensive care. He did go through a lot of intensive care, but he ended up all the time. He would say, Mom, I got to go to the emergency room. And so he would drive, and I would drive my car and meet him there. So many times, but it all had to do with the heart, not the kidneys. Even though he had nephrotic syndrome, he was in the intensive care in Miami, his kidneys were not being affected yet. And I say yet because when heart disease affects somebody, a lot of times it affects other organs. And I know that because I used to work in a hospital. I was a liaison. So I knew some things, but this brought it home because you're talking about my son. And so he just started going slowly. I could see that things were affecting him. His blood pressure was high. Then, and I'll tell you this, and I'll probably will go back, hindsight, I'll skip into it, but if you continue listening, you'll be able to put this big puzzle together. It's like a big puzzle, and I'm putting pieces in there, and so you can see the big picture. But David did great for a while. He did great, and I don't feel like I'm crying right now, but there may be videos that I do cry because the pain is like no other pain, and it doesn't go away. It just doesn't go away. But you learn how to live your life through it. And I have my other children, my daughter that's really close to me, and she's right here in North Carolina. She lives like 15, 20 minutes away from me. And my grandkids, her kids, they always look out, Grandma, you okay? And my daughter-in-law. But it does take a toll on you. Um, I'm in my I'm going to be 75. So, dealing with the death of a child at that age, at 70, it took a toll on me. And we will talk about that. Did I go into denial? I sure did. I went into denial. Anyway, like I said, I'm going to go back and forth, okay? It's a big puzzle. Put the pictures together. And if you have any questions once you go on, or any comments, please make them, and I will try my very best to help you, because I can relate. But David grew, his kids grew, and then he died 2021. In November 20th, he had 2 strokes. He developed a lot of problems that he developed septicemia later on his legs. But he had 2 strokes, and my daughter called me, and I ran back there to the hospital. He was in a somber mood. He lost his peripheral vision. That was November 2020, because those are the things that I read in my journal. Anyway, they were thinking maybe they needed to amputate his leg because of the cardiovascular, the blood flow in and out. But I just called a group of people that would help me, just align with me and help me to have hope. I didn't want my son's legs to be amputated. I didn't know, not so much how I would deal with it, but how he would deal with it. And a mother hurts for their children. And so they didn't have to do the amputation. And I'm so thankful and grateful for that. But he lost his peripheral vision. That means he couldn't drive. And so he was in the hospital. And that was the only thing. I think his thymus gland, that it's like a thermostat when you get cold, when you get hot. And David was always the type of man, because he was like a big teddy bear. He was, excuse me, he was 5'11" and a half. He was beautiful. But he always used to get hot. But after the stroke, he said, Mom, can you get me some hoodies or some sweaters? I said, why? He said, I'm cold. And of course, I understood later the thymus gland is like a thermostat. When he had the stroke, it affected his peripheral, but it affected that gland. So he would always be cold. So he would have blankets, where before that, it was the opposite. So I saw some things declining, not really realizing what was ahead. That was in November. January, he had an appointment for the doctor. I took him there. By that time, he's on oxygen. Okay, he was on oxygen maybe 2 years before this. But I took him to the eye doctor, and he said, do you think I'll be able to drive, Mom? I said, well, David, let's see what the doctor says. Let's just see. Let's just wait. So I went with him. I picked him up, of course, because he couldn't drive. I sat him in my seat, put the oxygen on him. He had his cane. At the end, it was the wheelchair, but he had his cane. And so I brought him in there, and I said, let me go park the car, and I'll come back in here. So they called him, and we went back there. And the doctor, and I'm not going to get into the doctor's names, but except his primary heart doctor, I will, because I had hope. And he was the kindest cardio doctor that I have ever, and I've worked with him, but he was the best, and I'll always honor that. But when Dr. Brown examined him, he said, okay, David, well, your peripheral vision is still the same. And he said, so what does that mean? He said, that means you can't drive. And so he looked at me. He said, come back. He gave us an appointment like for 6 or 7 months. Now, mind you, this is January 2021. So once we left there, he said, so, Mom, so I'm not going to drive? I said, you won't be able to drive anymore, but I'm here. I'm here. I'm your mom. I'll lay my life for you. I'll lay it down for you, whatever I have to do. And I did. I did before, but I did from January all the way to that time. Anyway, he gave his car to his son, which his son still has it. So from there, things started going downhill, but not quickly. He had to get home health. But mind you, if you're listening, if you're hearing something, a mother gets into a place in her mind that is very hard to be, and I'm going to use this word, to be logical. I just couldn't. But when home health started coming, I'm thinking, okay, something's not right here. And I don't know what it is, and David is not telling me. So every time home health came to his little apartment, I would go in. He would say, the nurse is coming. I said, okay, I'll be there, because I didn't live far from where his apartment was. The house that we owned before, we don't own that now. We owned a different one. So now it would have been further. But I said, I'll be there. So I would talk to the nurse. And there came a time, that was January, February, March. And then in April, they put him under palliative care. And I'm thinking, why palliative care? This is the step before hospice. But I'm not thinking anything that my son's so sick that he's going to die. I wasn't thinking that. You know, you don't think like that, because you want your children, you want your child, in this case David, I want him to live. I want him to grow up even beyond 40. But anyway, so what happened at that time, they put him under palliative care. So the palliative care nurse, she was there, and I remember his eating habits change. And I would go to Publix to do my shopping, because that's where I shop. And I would say, do you want me to pick you up something? And a lot of times he'll send me a text of what he wanted. I said, okay, on the way back, I'll drop it to your house, because I had a key. But almost at the end, he would say, no, Mom, I don't need anything. I said, really? You don't want anything? He said, no. I said, okay, David. And so when the palliative, before she went outside, he was saying, I want to have a trip with my brother-in-law. We want to go to Florida. And I want my son to be with me, and his son, Wesley, which are first cousins. And I'm thinking, but David is not well enough to do this. And see, the palliative nurse, she was measuring the measuring of his arms, because he was losing muscle mass. I mean, these are things that, again, I'm not a doctor, but my experience has shown me, not just with my son, my sisters and my parents, okay? So I've learned a lot of things along the way, and plus people in my life that are in the medical field. So I could tell that when she was measuring, she just kind of looked at me, and she sat down, and he said, okay, can you please tell my mom that I'm able to go on this trip? And she said to him, David, you can go on the trip. Okay, he goes on the trip. But before he goes on the trip, we go outside, the palliative nurse and myself. And then I said, I need to talk to you. I'm scared. And I just started crying. And she said, okay. Why? I said, why are you telling him that he can go on this trip? Why? He's so sick. And she looked at me, and you could tell she was very hesitant, very loving, a lot of empathy for me, but at the same time needed to tell me the truth. Anyway, she said, that will be his last trip. And I just looked, and I said, what do you mean? What do you mean this is going to be his last trip? And I said, can you please tell me about his prognosis? These are the things that a lot of parents, they enter into a place of denial, and they're afraid to hear it. I was afraid too, but I knew what the word prognosis, I know what diagnosis means, but I also know what prognosis means. Working in an environment, a medical field for 17 and a half years, working with doctors and nurses, I know what that is, plus my own experience with my own family. And so she said, he went on his trip in March. She said, no, no. He went at the end of March. He came back in April. She said, he's got between now and 3 months. I said, what? What did you say? I said, did I hear you correctly, please? And her eyes got watery, and she said, she took my hand, and she said, I'm so sorry. I'm so sorry. I said, okay, but is there anything that can be done? Can he go to the hospital? I was just trying to find hope. Well, there was no hope. Trying to find something that I could cling on to. And I couldn't. I felt lost. I felt alone. I felt isolated. I felt all these emotions. I'm thinking about how maybe I should take him to another hospital. Maybe I should. All these thoughts were coming. He went on his trip, and he had fun, and I got a lot of pictures of him and his son Elijah, and his best friend, his brother-in-law Joey, because Joey is married to Kim's sister, so it's family. Anyway, he went on this trip, and he said, Mom, it's gonna be okay. And I thought to myself, nothing will ever be okay. Nothing. And when she told me that, she hugged me and she said, I'm so sorry. And she just said, don't lose hope. I said, but what kind of hope do I have? Is he going to live? And she didn't answer me. Anyway, she hugged me. I got in my car. I called my daughter sobbing. I told her, and she started crying. And he went on his trip. And then from the trip on, I will tell you, and this is about David's journey, but me as his mom, my journey too. My journey through it and my journey after he passed and where I am today. So we're going to stop there. And on my next video, we will talk about what took place and how he ended up in the hospital and how he never came back out. And there's things that I still do forget because of the shock. But my daughter is reminding me of a lot of things, and I'm making notes. So I hope, again, this is David's channel, David's Journey 2021, because that's the year he died. And this is Gladys. And I hope, I'm not a professional speaker. I'm speaking from my heart and my emotions to be able to help other people that have lost their child, or maybe somebody has an interest in learning about this, and that's really, really important. So I hope you enjoy, and if you have questions, please, there's no question that's too bad or too good. I'm here to help you go through this bridge like I'm going, okay? Have a wonderful day. Today it is Monday, and right now it's 3:45 Eastern time. Thank you, and have a great day. Bye-bye.